Today for Full Album Friday, we're going to go back to 1965 to look at Junior Wells' masterpiece, Hoodoo Man Blues. If you don't know Junior Wells, the fact of the matter is not only are you missing out on one of the greatest musicians of all time, but you're missing out on one of the true badasses of blues music. Seriously, while most people like to think that that gangsta type of persona came about in the 1980s, it actually happened about 20 years earlier with Junior Wells. Musically, so many of the songs that he wrote and recorded are now considered blues classics. And yet, for whatever reason, he hasn't become as much of a household name as many of his peers. This entire album was recorded very quickly in September of 1965 and released only a few weeks later. And the backing band is simply called the Chicago Blues Band, but we'll get to them in a second. You see, there were some really interesting circumstances behind the recording of this album because the label basically let Junior Wells pick his entire backing band. And they also allowed him to work outside of the 2 to 3 minute song length constraint that so many artists had to work on at the time. Both of these circumstances were almost unheard of in that era, but both the label and the production team were so taken by Junior Wells that they basically gave him any creative control he wanted so he'd do the record. So let's say it's 1965 and you're in Chicago and you're about to record your debut blues album and your label has said you can pick anyone you want. What do? Obviously, you go out and you get Buddy Guy to play guitar and do backing vocals all over your album, and that's just what he did. Now, due to some incorrect legal information, on the first couple pressings of this album, Buddy Guy is actually credited as Friendly Chap. But the second you hear the guitar, you know it's him, and on later pressings, the name was corrected. Buddy Guy absolutely kills it on Good Morning Little Schoolgirl and on a number of other songs on this album. But he's also able to step back and let Wells' harmonica take the spotlight. And it's the balance and interplay between the two that makes this album so exceptional. These songs have some of the heaviest grooves you'll ever find, and it's the way that there's also this grit, this dirt on every single track that makes them all the better. It's got this organic, almost back alley feel at moments. And then there are times where the band gets so deep into the groove that you feel like you're just sitting in on a jam session. But there's no question that Junior Wells is running the show at every second of every song. And he brings some of the most outright blistering solos and progressions ever on this album. You also get to hear the way that he makes his harmonica almost a second vocalist on a number of points. And it's the way that he's almost duetting with himself that makes this album so cool. And this style would be copied by so many performers in every single genre in the following years. Junior Wells pulls out some fantastic covers to complement his originals on this album, and for me, there's nothing quite like Snatch It Back and Hold It anywhere else in music history. This record captures Junior Wells perfectly at every angle, and after only a few minutes, you're gonna realize why so many people hold him in such high regard. It was argued for years that Chicago blues relied so heavily on in-person emotion and feeling that you'd never be able to properly capture it in a studio environment. And while there is some level of truth to that, Hoodoo Man Blues shows that truly talented performers can easily overcome that obstacle. And if somehow this record isn't in your collection, you need to change that right away. Thank me later.